I'm excited to be doing this next round of our fireside chat with you. I'm gonna give you a couple of quick tips while we're getting started about how you can get the most out of this book club webinar. This is a virtual book club that's part of the release of How the World Sees You. I'm excited that you're here with me today. I'm going to do a couple of quick notes. First of all, if you want to participate in the chat, there's going to be a chat box where you can ask questions. Team Fascinate is going to be moderating for you, and we have a bumper crop of Fascinate certified advisors who are also going to be part of the chat, and you'll see them answering your questions. We love to get your comments. We love to hear what you're thinking, the questions that you have. So be sure to ask the questions because we're going to have Q&A later on. And if you want to participate with us on Twitter, then by all means, please do. You can find me at Sally Hogshead, and you can find the Fascinate team at How to Fascinate, and our hashtag is How the World Sees You. Now, there are a couple of things that we're going to be talking about. First of all, I want you to understand the why. Why do you need to communicate differently to make a brilliant first impression? Why can't you just keep communicating the same way that you were doing a few years ago? Next, I'm going to get into a little bit of the how. I'm going to give you some quick strategies, 7 quick strategies to understand how you can make a positive impression based on your natural, authentic advantages. Okay, ready? Okay, here we go. My favorite first impression of all time was these two people. This is my mother and father. They've known each other over 60 years. They both went to college in Iowa. They met at a dance. And when I first saw this photograph of my mom, I said, "Oh, you were dressed for a 1950s style party." And she said, "No, that's actually what we really wore." So that's my mom, Janet, on one side, and my dad, Howard, on the other. And they were lined up at a school dance. And my father, in his first impression to my mother, introduced himself, and he said, "Hi, I'm Howard Hogshead from Hudson, Iowa." And the story goes, my mom burst out laughing and said, "Oh, come on, nobody's last name is really Hogshead." So I'd like to prove that no matter what kind of first impression you have, no matter how the relationship begins, you can go on to have an incredibly meaningful, real, fascinating relationship. My parents are celebrating their 59th wedding anniversary this week. We just got back last week from a dude ranch in Colorado, and this is the whole family. So even if you don't have a fabulous last name like Hogshead, you can still make a distinct impression that creates a memorable connection with the person that you're talking to that goes on to lead to a loyal interaction. We're going to be going over first the problem, and then I'm going to be giving you 7 strategies for how you can make sure that you're tapping into your authentic advantages. Now, let's talk about the problem. Every time that you walk into a room, you exude a certain impression. Whether you realize it or not, you're sending off certain signals and cues, and the simple first impression forms the basis for people's entire perception of you. Now, the problem is that in a world that's distracted, commoditized, crowded, it's incredibly difficult to break through and grab somebody's attention. My company did an informal research, and we found that introductions had about a 90% failure rate. In other words, 90% of the time when you introduce yourself, you will not lead to a real connection, and you won't even have a real conversation. So what can you do to be in that 10%? What we found is that those first few seconds are absolutely crucial. That how can you fit yourself into this golden window of an attention span? If you earn someone interest during those first critical seconds, then when you connect with them, they're far more likely to receive what you're saying. They focus on you. They're fascinated by you. Their brains opens up. So when you think about what you're saying, it's not just about what you're saying, it's how you're saying it and who you're being when you say it. So in a distracted or crowded or busy or stressed environment, which is pretty much status quo in today's ADD world, it's important for you to understand how your personality is most likely to make that connection so that they remember what you say, so they take action on what you say, so that you can build a relationship that leads to lasting loyalty. Now, it can be frustrating when you're talking to somebody and it seems like they're kind of looking all over the room and you're really trying to build an authentic relationship and they seem like they're all over the place. You can't make a point, you can't introduce yourself, you can't lead a meeting. But here's the reality. In a distracted environment, people don't have time for you to ramble. They don't have time to sit through a lengthy pitch. They want you to cut to the chase, to give them the bottom line, to make it short and sweet, make it easy for them to understand. So in this webinar, I'm going to be giving you some tips of how you can condense what you're already doing, who you are at your best, so that you can focus on making sure that your listener is focused on you. So let's talk a little bit about the science behind this. I spent about 10 years studying the science of introductions and communication. And what I found is that when you're speaking with somebody, introducing yourself to them, speaking to them in a meeting, having any type of a conversation, if they feel distracted and stressed, they're far less likely to remember what you say, let alone take action on it. So when you talk to somebody, if you don't have a clear introduction, then you actually create a negative impression. In other words, you end up worse than if you hadn't even introduced yourself in the first place. So the stakes are high today, and this puts added stress on it. Here's something that I want you to remember, a fascinate principle. It's better to avoid introducing yourself to someone than to waste their time with weak communication. Attention span is the most precious, non-renewable resource. When you introduce yourself to somebody, you want to be respectful of not only their time and energy, but also their attention span. So if you introduce yourself, that's why these 7 strategies I'm going to be giving you today are so crucial, so you can make sure that you're not wasting their time, energy, or their attention span. Every time you introduce yourself, you're doing one of 2 things. You're either adding value or you're taking up space. Now, when you introduce yourself to someone and you add value, they want more of you. They want your opinions, they want your ideas. They're more likely to respect and admire you. They're more likely to buy from you, to hire you, to promote you, to befriend you, to champion you. If you're only taking up space, then they're more likely to block you out. They don't read your email, they don't respond to your phone call, they don't listen to what you say. So as things become more stressed, more distracted, more overwhelmed, that's why these first few seconds are absolutely essential. It's not your listener's responsibility to figure out how you can solve a problem. It's not your manager's responsibility. It's not your prospect's responsibility. It's your responsibility. It's your job to make sure that your audience understands how you add value and why they should listen to you instead of somebody else, why they should focus on you and your introduction and extend that into a long-term relationship. Now, I realize this probably makes you feel stressed. It feels stressful to me when I go and I introduce myself sometimes to people, because now the pressure is on you. The pressure is not on your listener anymore. The pressure is on you. But there's a piece of good news. The good news is you already have certain advantages that are built into your personality. And when you use these, when you tap into these natural advantages, you become intensely valuable. Now, I use the word fascination, and when I say that you become a fascinating conversationalist, I don't mean that you're charismatic or you're razzle-dazzle or that you're super sparkly or that you wear something outrageous. What I mean is that you're compelling and that you're seen as valuable and that people want to engage further with you. So the way in which your personality is most likely to add value, turns out it's not random at all. I want you to think back over your life, think back to those times when you had a really successful first conversation with somebody. Maybe it was a job interview, maybe it was a networking event, maybe it was even a first date. Well, there are patterns why you make a great impression in certain scenarios and not in others. But if you can identify what those traits are, then you can replicate it. You can have a more measurable and controllable outcome. So think about yourself. What kind of first impression do you make? When somebody meets you in a business environment, when somebody meets you in an interview, are they going to remember what you say? Are they going to follow up with you? Are they going to take your call afterwards? Or is your business card just going to end up like a little piece of clutter in the trash, stuck at the bottom of their pocket? So in other words, how does the world see you? Now here's the good news. You can have a better outcome. No matter what style of your personality, you can make a brilliant first impression. No matter what archetype you are, no matter which advantages you use. So let's start getting into it, okay? Okay, there are 2 halves of a great introduction. The first half is how the world sees you. In other words, what do people value in you? What makes your communication mesmerizing or useful or even entertaining? The second half of it is how is your personality most likely to add value to others? What do they want from you? Can you think ahead and see what are their problems that you could help them solve? What are their conversational hooks that would be appealing to them? What are they already thinking about that you could tap into? I'm going to give you some specific tips on this later. Now I realize it can be daunting to introduce yourself to a prospective client, prospective boss, or even just the person standing next to you in line at Starbucks. It's natural to feel a little bit intimidated. But face-to-face introductions are some of the most valuable types. And in a world that tends to be electronically connected, in which we meet people on Twitter and Facebook, it's even more essential to have those face-to-face communications. And the cool thing about face-to-face communications is that you get a whole range of neurological responses when you talk to the other person, because you can naturally be exuding what your personality is. You can be sending those signals and cues very specifically in a way that's much harder when you only have an emoticon to put at the end of an email. So in this conversation, just for the purposes of this discussion, I'm going to be focusing on business conversations, in-person business conversations, such as the kind that you would have at a networking event. So imagine that you're going to a big conference, it's a networking event, you feel intimidated, you feel like you're distracted, you know your listener's distracted. How can you cut through and build that relationship? It all begins with understanding how to introduce yourself, and then it continues with the ability to engage your listener in a fascinating conversation. And here's what I mean by fascinating conversation. Fascinating conversation is one that bypasses the superficialities, that doesn't just talk about the pleasantries. A fascinating conversation is real and meaningful, but it can be fascinating in any type of way. It doesn't mean that you two suddenly become engrossed, sitting in the corner, going out for coffee. It just means that you have a real interaction, and that person opens up to you, and that you have some kind of a connection with them in that moment. On the other hand, a purely functional conversation is one in which you say, so where are you from? And they tell you the answer, and you go, okay. Or all you're doing is exchanging information. You're exchanging data. You're not actually having any kind of a spark. There's no real exchange between you. When you can be authentic, in your communication, you're far more likely to engage them and make a positive first impression. And this is crucial if you want to be influential. Your influence as a professional will be measured according to your ability to get people to listen and take action. So in our conversation, I'm going to give you these 7 different strategies to turn a dull introduction, in other words, just one that's purely functional, to turn it into a fascinating conversation that leads to a later connection. So here we go. 7 strategies for brilliant first impressions. The first time we've put these together, first time we presented them, and I'm excited to be able to share this new material with you. First of all, find one way in which you are most likely to add value to the conversation. For example, what problem is your listener facing, and how could you potentially solve them? From the moment that you meet someone, be asking yourself, how can I add value to this person? So let's say you're sitting next to somebody at this business conference that we're using as an example. How can you contribute to them? Well, part of this comes down to asking the right questions, which I'm going to show you in just a little bit. When you contribute to your listener, then people are going to be far more likely to want to talk with you. So let's say, for example, if I were to meet somebody, my archetype is the catalyst. I have primary passion, secondary innovation. That means I'm most likely to speak the language of relationship and the language of creativity. So if I'm speaking with somebody, I know that my home base, the way in which I'm most likely to contribute to them, is going to be through relationship and through creativity. On the other hand, let's say if you're a wise owl communicates very differently. They're going to be likely to communicate through mystique and trust, the language of listening and the language of stability. So there's no one right way to introduce yourself, but when you understand the way in which the world sees you at your best, then you can be more confident, more authentic, and more likely to make that great first impression. What can you contribute to the conversation? For example, is there something that you've been seeing in your work recently that you could offer up as a piece of starter information? You don't just want to have the flotsam and jetsam of conversation that floats on by and nobody notices. You want to have real nuggets. Have you discovered a new way to attract customers? Did you have an insight that you took away from a speaker at this hypothetical conference? The key here is for you to have the mindset that your listener has a need, and it's your job to start to figure that out so that you can contribute to them in some way, so that you can have a real connection that's based on real material instead of just going through the motions of how do you like this faceless, nameless hotel that we're staying in. If you're not adding value, you're just taking up space, remember? So let's go a step deeper. Your next step is to understand how the world sees you. How is your personality most likely to impress and influence that person sitting on the other side of the table? And you already have these patterns of communication, and they shape how people see you and whether or not they want to continue talking to you. Over the past decade, I developed the first way to measure how people see you at your best, how they perceive you. And this decade of research was, as you know, just published in How the World Sees You. I just got an awesome email from HarperCollins last night. I'm super psyched. Yeah, my team's here with me. Everybody, we're dancing. We have another week in New York Times. We're number 7 in advice, how-to, and miscellaneous, which is one of the most competitive and difficult categories to get in. So thank you to you for making that possible for us. In the book, I described that there are 7 different advantages, 7 different ways of communicating. And when you understand how the world sees you, you can be far more likely to use specific advantages in the way that's going to be most effective in captivating your listener. These 7 different advantages began in my research when I started looking at brands. But what I found is that we as individuals also use 7 different advantages, and that your primary advantage combines with your secondary advantage. And when you combine your primary and your secondary, that gets us to your archetype. Now, many of you already know your archetype. And for those of you who don't, I'm just going to give you a quick lickety-split lesson in this. There are 49 different personality types, and they use different styles of communication, and they're effective in different ways. You can find out which adjectives describe how you are most effective when you take the Fascination Advantage assessment. For example, the talent archetype is expressive, stylish, and emotionally intelligent. When talent, I was about to say talents bounce into the room, but apparently catalysts do too. When you talk with a talent, they tend to be charming, they make great eye contact, they're excellent with personal branding, they tend to be attractive, they're very emotionally intelligent, meaning they're intuitive about what you're thinking and feeling. They're able to communicate themselves well, they tend to be really articulate. They combine the best of passion, which is the language of relationship, with prestige, which is the language of excellence. So relationship and excellence come together to form the talent. One of the things that I love about talents is that you can talk to them about almost anything. They're very open. Some people might even call them an open book. But not everybody is a talent. Talents have advantages and potential disadvantages. Another archetype would be the veiled strength. Veiled strengths communicate in a totally different way. They're realistic, intentional, and to the point. So they're not going to compliment you on what you're wearing. They're not going to strike up a frivolous conversation. Instead, they're going to be intentional, rational, systematic, methodical, and to the point. And this is their advantage in situations in which they can communicate in that style. So let's talk about you. How can you start a conversation most effectively? There are 7 different ways that you communicate. Those are the 7 different advantages. But let me give you a few examples. If you have the innovation advantage, you might introduce yourself with humor, with a witty remark. You might make an unexpected comment. If you have primary passion, then you would connect with a warm smile and body language. I have a primary passion, so it's really easy for me when I'm talking to somebody, whether it's on the phone or whether it's in person, whether it's through email, to use a lot of adjectives, exclamation points, smiley faces. Power is a personality that would start a conversation with a strong stance. Maybe they would offer an opinion. A prestige personality would open topics about improvement. Prestige personalities want to go up and they want to elevate the result. Next, a trust personality would make the person they're talking to feel comfortable. A trust personality might ask, where are you from? Or how do you like this hotel? Because trust is all about stability, familiarity, not pushing people outside their comfort zone, making sure that you're perceived as dependable. Next, mystique. Mystique personalities ask great questions. They're intellectual, they're systematic. Remember, we talked just a moment ago about the veiled strength. A mystique personality wouldn't talk about themselves. They would want to find out about the other person before they opened up. And finally, an alert personality. Alert personalities are great with details, and you've probably heard me say before, I love to hire alert personalities because I'm not a detail person, so it's a great way of optimizing what I bring to business. In first impressions, alert personalities tend to be very specific. They don't want to talk about generalities. It's almost as though they're talking in bullet points. You can see the PowerPoint presentation in their mind as they're going through the specific details. They want certainty and tangible outcomes, and this is what makes them so strong in their jobs. Now, your third strategy is to create your anthem. Fascinating conversationalists don't have to be sparkly. They don't have to, remember, they don't have to be outrageous. There's a way that's appropriate for you. And when you understand how the world sees you at your best, you can find the perfect words to introduce yourself. I started my career as an advertising copywriter. And one of my favorite parts of my job was helping national brands find the perfect words to describe themselves. The thing that always frustrated me about the system, about this research that I was doing, is I did discover in 2009 a way for you to measure how the world sees you and to tell you your archetype. In other words, to tell you those traits that are most professionally attractive about you. But I didn't know how to put it into words. And last year, we had a major breakthrough in the company. Suddenly, I realized that I could take the exact same methodology that I had with brands, and I could apply it to people. So when a brand is communicating itself, there are two things it needs to know. First of all, how does the world see that brand? Just like how does your listener listen to you? How does your audience see you? And secondly, how can you articulate yourself in a way that's going to be most compelling based on your natural advantages? Well, I realized that we could do the same thing with your personality. And so when you go into the Fascination Advantage report and you find those adjectives, we can build a tagline for your personality. So when you're introducing yourself, all the heavy lifting has already been done. Once you know what makes you valuable to others, you're more authentic and confident and more likely to make a positive impression. Now, we've put together a cool mini site with all kinds of resources for you. When you go to howtofascinate.com/anthem, you'll be able to get free resources and you'll be able to have access to online training. You can create the tagline for your personality. So I recommend you check it out, howtofascinate.com/anthem. Now, I have a special surprise. I'm going to bring on one of my favorite team members, my beloved, the president of Fascinate, my husband, and hi, love.
Hi.
And Ed is going to introduce you to some of our team members so that you can see what their anthem is. In other words, those perfect words that describe how they're different and what they do best. Now, you'll probably notice if you're in the chat box that Team Fascinate will not be answering your questions for a few minutes, and that's because you're going to be meeting them up here. Okay? I'll leave you here.
All right.
Okay. Bye. Be back.
Hi, everybody. So we're going to run through anthems, the tagline for the personality of some of our team members, and they're going to be able to tell you exactly how these anthems show the world who they are at their best. First off, we have Elizabeth. Yay!
Hi everybody, my name is Elizabeth Rissman, and at my highest value I deliver imaginative problem solving. So here at How to Fascinate, I've been with the company since about April 2013, and I'm the Director of Strategic Operations. So what I do is I look at our very sophisticated back-end processes. We have this database that is completely custom. We use a CRM, a lot of you know Infusionsoft. So what I do is Sally and Ed will come to me with a great big new idea, and they're like, you know what, this is going to knock the socks off everybody. This is how we started Project Fascination. It's how we start all of the emails that you get that you love. It's really how we start a lot of our programs, and they'll say, this is what we want to do. Now you have to make it work. So I sit there and I say, oh, okay, and I kind of hem and haw a little bit. But what I basically do is very quickly I imagine the process and then I execute it very quickly. That's the innovation. I'm a quick start, so that's my innovation and my alert coming together at once for quick execution. So I'm basically the one who makes it work at the end of the day.
So your anthem is?
Imaginative problem solving.
And you use that anthem as the basis for what you do and how you do it here at Fascinate.
Absolutely.
Right. And when you go about the day, how do you use the anthem in deciding what you're going to do when you undertake a task?
Right. So you know, something will come up. Say we'll have an issue with email or issue in Infusionsoft. Basically, what I do is, what are our options? What are all the resources at our hand? How do we quickly execute and fix this so that we can get back to serving our customers?
Right. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Corey. Here's Corey, and Corey, too, as a member of our team, has an anthem tagline for her personality that she uses to explain who she is at her best and how she does what she does. Could you tell them, Corey?
Hi, everyone. My anthem is meticulous follow-through. I'm a detective, primary advantage, secondary mystique. And at our office, I have lists for lists. I make sure people stay on track of deadlines. If Sally has a lot of upcoming things, a lot of monthly obligations, I be sure to check back with our resources and vendors all the time to make sure that they're getting everything that they need in a timely manner.
So if we were to come to you with some problem that involved this great brainstorming session, would you be the type person that we would immediately go to first?
Probably not. I can brainstorm, but I'm much better at making sure that the ideas from the brainstorm get implemented.
And get done, hence meticulous follow-through. And that's important. You can brainstorm. You do brainstorm, right?
But it's not where I shine.
All right, and you're familiar with the terms quicksand and wellspring. Can you talk a little bit about that and how what your wellspring is and what your quicksand is?
Yes, so my wellspring is anything that's very detail-oriented. If someone gives me a very specific outline of what they want, I power through it like a machine. My quicksand is when there's no structure. If someone just says, you have free reign to do something, you can do it any way you want, I'm like, no, I don't want to do it any way I want. I want to do it the way you want.
So you could do it that way,
yes,
right?
But
that wouldn't be your
harder.
your highest and best. All right. Thanks, Corey.
Bye.
And next we have Beth Martin. Beth Martin is our brand manager, and she's going to come on and talk to you about her anthem, her tagline for her personality.
Hi, everyone. I'm Beth. I'm the brand manager here at How to Fascinate. My highest value, I deliver dedicated vision. One way that I do this, well, I'm the orchestrator, which is passion and alert. And one way that I do that is, if you go into my office, I have about 8 cork boards up on covering every single wall in the office so that I can keep track of every single image that we have, every single words associated with the different advantages, and I'm dedicated to the vision of the brand in a way that whenever anybody's working on a project, they can come into my office and they know the colors that we're using for that advantage. They know the logo that they're supposed to be using and the images that they're supposed to be using in order to create a cohesive brand. And with having the passion, I am passionate about how to fascinate. So I can look at all of the details and I see how they all work together and I can keep everybody on track.
We actually call it a brand audit. When we're coming up with a web page that has to be done or some other materials, we send it to Beth, and Beth does the brand audit because of your anthem.
Yep, dedicated vision.
Dedicated vision, that she's dedicated to our vision of having this awesome brand and having these awesome brand materials, and she's our go-to person. Now, you could do, and sometimes do, meticulous follow-through, for example, correct?
Yes, but I would have to be passionate about it.
Right.
That's where it comes in.
Gotcha.
With the alert being my secondary, the details, when I'm passionate about something, I see all of the details and how they fit together, hence the dedicated vision. But if I'm not passionate about a project, it's very difficult for me to see all of the details and see all of the things that need to be done because that passion there is lost. So that's something that's a little bit strange about an orchestrator, but also great.
Thank you. Thank you. We have an exciting announcement today. Just this week, we had our first Certified Advisors course. And we have some graduates from our Certified Advisors course, and I'm going to announce their first names for you and to give a shout out to all of them who are watching. Samantha, Becky, Anna, Carrie, Finca, Tara, Gary, Robin, Karen, and Mary. Yay! Woo! So they just got through an intensive 3-day program where they would outline. They know the assessment backwards and forwards. They know the anthem backwards and forwards. They know this book, How the World Sees You, inside and out. And these certified advisors are using their knowledge to help you in different ways. Some of them are working within a company to help train the other employees. Some of them are sales trainers where they're training sales teams or departments. Other of them are individual coaches out there coaching folks just like you to help you become your best with the science of fascination. Sally?
Hey, I have another special announcement. We just had so
So
much.
just announced that we got number 7 again
I,
on the bestseller list.
So
Oh,
yeah,
just
we got
making
that
sure.
one covered.
Yeah, okay.
So we just had so much traffic go to our site that we're having server problems. I want to give you an alternate URL for those resources and training options that I just promised you. So here's the alternate URL. Ready? www.anthem.howtofascinate.com. That's anthem.howtofascinate.com. Good luck. I hope you can squeeze through.
That's actually a cool page. It's got, when you're ready to sit down and get your anthem done, there's a lot of great resources about how to create your anthem, how to apply your anthem, and how to use it to make your life better and
And some
become.
options that
Yeah.
if you want instruction from me in an online format, you can also get that too.
Great.
So do we have any? I'm going to let you take some specific questions
The
from
Q&A.
you guys.
Yeah. So
The
I've
chats. This is funny.
Wait, let me do this one. Okay.
So
There's
like
the first question. The important question first. All right.
No, come down here with me. And here is the question.
Oh, it's backwards.
No, it's only for us. So
Oh, okay.
no, we're not giants. In fact, I'm not even wearing shoes.
Yeah.
But we just.
Neither am I.
I don't know. I guess we're kind of tall.
Uh,
At least for
For
yeah, that's
over
right.
here.
I know.
okay.
I don't
So the first question.
The question was, someone asked if you two are giants, and Beth wrote, no, we just have a short team. Her words. But you know what? Good things come in small packages.
So that was a great question, but that one
Yeah.
doesn't get a prize. Actually, do we have a prize today for some of the questions?
A hug and a kiss.
Hug and a kiss. Okay. First question comes from Kathy. Please explain the archetype twin. The similarities and differences. What value is this about the twin? And how can this information about what your twin is be utilized in the overall system? Great question.
Yeah. So on the cover of the book, do we
That's
lose
what,
it?
right here.
Okay. So on the cover of the book, there's a mirror, and the mirror reflects how the world sees you at your best. But this is just one perspective. And so as I was developing the system, I wanted to make sure that I was able to give you other perspectives. You know that feeling when you get to see yourself from an unusual perspective, maybe you catch a glimpse of yourself in a mirrored surface or a reflective window as you're walking by. So your twin shows you who you are from a slightly different angle. It's the same top 2 advantages, just flipped in order. So I'm a catalyst, passion plus innovation. My twin is the rock star, innovation plus passion. We were just with Robin Sales, who's a rock star, who's a new Fascinate certified advisor. Whoop. Ed is a maverick leader, primary innovation, secondary power. His twin is the change agent. Now, the advantage of knowing your twin is that you get a whole other range of adjectives, those specialty adjectives that you can use to describe yourself, that describe how the world sees you at your best. So that instead of being all things to all people and end up being nothing to anyone, you can figure out where can you specialize so that when you go into a first impression, when you go into that job interview or that networking event, that you can already know the way in which you're most likely to win, you're most likely to put your listener at ease so their brain can open up and you can have a connection that doesn't feel distracted and stressed and doubting, and so one of you ends up awkwardly walking away to the cheese platter.
So I'm the maverick leader, and so if you go up onto the chart, what you do is you take my primary advantage, innovation, you go over to my secondary power. There's me as the maverick leader. If you want to find my twin, you would go to my secondary, switch that to be the primary, go over to innovation, and you'll find right there, that's my twin, the change agent. And the report that you get, it shows you actually the strengths or the degree in which you have each of these advantages. And sometimes your primary advantages won't be separated by that much.
Right. Sometimes they can be very close. But here's the point. The system is based on branding and marketing, not on psychology. So unlike DISC or Myers-Briggs, this isn't about psychology.
Nobody's getting a diagnosis here?
Nobody's getting a diagnosis. This is who you are at your best. In other words, it's aspirational. And so we want to give you as many words as possible. So as I was writing the book and creating your reports, I made sure that I had a lot of great marketing phrases in there. So when you go into the book or you watch your online video about your archetype, you can literally just cut and paste all the language that I gave to you because it's all right there. That becomes the basis of the anthem, but it can also be the basis of your LinkedIn profile. of the About section of your website, of your next positive introduction?
Thank you for that question. The next one comes from Lynn Underhill, and this is a question we get a lot, and I'm glad you asked this question, Lynn, because we use one of the advantages is trust, and sometimes people will get the dormant advantage then of trust. And so Lynn says, under your definition of trust, does it have anything to do with whether or not people find you trustworthy? So is an honesty factor involved?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Right.
So let me put that question aside for a minute about trust, and let's talk about first impressions with the passion advantage, because just simply because it's a frame of reference we've already talked about. Passion personalities tend to be warm, they're enthusiastic, they use a lot of body language, they jump up and down on their feet, and so if you have dormant passion, it doesn't mean that you don't feel passionately. It just means that passion is not the way in which you're going to be most effective when you make that first impression. Similarly, if you have primary trust, it means you're very consistent, very stable, reliable. You like schedules. You like to be able to map things out in advance. If you're starting a project or starting a conversation, you probably wouldn't do something radically new. You might be uncomfortable if somebody put you in a position in which you had to constantly evolve, constantly come up with new stuff. So if you have a dormant trust advantage, which I do, and Ed also scores very low on the trust advantage.
And I trust her.
and you trust me. What it means is that you don't like patterns. Instead of doing things the same way over and over again, you want to do things in a new way. You want to discover, kind of push the limits. Creative personalities frequently have dormant trust advantage.
Can I give an advantage? So back in my law career, which most of you know, I retired from in February, but towards the end of my career, I'd been doing 22 years with the same firm in the same building, doing the same cases, doing all the same work. And towards the end there, because my dormant advantage is also trust too, I just really couldn't get excited about the cases. Not because they weren't good people, not because they weren't good cases, it's just I'd done them before. They were the same thing over and over that I'd done. And it really wasn't challenging me or moving me on to new places. So for those of you who have dormant trust, it's not that you're not trustworthy, it's just that
you don't like
you want to mix it
routine.
up. Yeah, you need to mix it up.
So but there were plenty of attorneys that did have primary trust, and for them that was their advantage. So it would be to their benefit to try to create clients and create a trial structure that would be very regimented, the same thing. I like. Wait, this is kind of funny. Wait, let's do that again. Row, row, row.
So you're both dormant trust. So.
Okay, you know what? I need to get back with them, but you can come back in a little bit. But I want to make sure that we get through their 7, and then will you come back?
I will.
Okay, keep asking questions.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, magic clicker. Okay, so next, ask real questions. Now, there's a temptation sometimes that when you first meet somebody that you ask a meaningless question so that the stakes aren't very high and you're not really putting yourself out there and you don't have to think. But when it comes to first impressions, your questions matter as much or more as your answers, especially if you're initiating. So the goal here is to get away from trite topics like where are you from, geography questions. Geography questions don't get you very far. And instead, come around to a meaningful question so that you're both effortlessly engaged. You know that feeling when you're having a fascinating conversation, you don't have to try. You don't have to put on some frozen mask of, and you don't have to effortfully come up with one topic after another. Instead, it just kind of flows. It feels easy, it feels effortless. So once you've done that, not only you're more likely to have a connection, you're likely to have a lot more fun, you feel much more stimulated, and you're opening up your brain to new ways of thinking, to creating new neural pathways in terms of not only your relationships, but in terms of your field and in terms of your industry. So you don't have to be witty or spontaneous in order to ask great questions. You just have to be thinking about what does the person on the other side of the table, or standing in line next to you, or sitting next to you, what do they need? What's going on in their mind right at that time? I'm going to give you a couple of examples of some questions that you might ask. And I'm going to come back to this context we were talking about just a moment ago of a business conference where you don't know anybody and you're coming, it's a networking event, you're trying to make a positive impression, and you know that you're not going to have a lot of time to sit there and go around and around on the trite topics, and instead you want to go right to a discussion that would allow you to get to know the other person and allow them to get to know you quickly too. So one example might be, you could say, hey, what's been the most successful boost to your business in the last year? Now, this is the kind of question that makes people think. And when you ask a question that makes people think, they immediately become engaged. Another example of a question might be, what's the main thing that you want to get out of this conference? So talk to them about their goals. This is, especially if you have a prestige advantage, talk to them about how do they want to improve themselves. You don't go to a conference to get dished up more status quo. You go to a conference because you want to have an outcome of some kind. The same is true for any conversation. Remember, every time you communicate, you're either adding value or taking up space. And one of the best ways to add value is to help somebody else elucidate what they want, and then maybe in some way you'll be able to contribute and help them get it. A third question, what's stressing you out about stressing out your team these days? Have you found any solutions? When you get somebody talking about what is stressing them out, people can go on such a roll. It's when they kind of get into a rant. Oh, our email box is totally overloaded. Oh, we've got this client that's driving us insane. Oh, we just had our budget slashed. And what you're doing in a moment like that is you're giving them a very safe place to have a conversation about something very real, maybe even a little bit vulnerable. Emotion plays a really strong role in first impressions. If you can get somebody to experience an emotion, they're far more likely to listen to you. Our brains don't forget emotion very well. We forget information. We forget data. They'll forget your name. I think it was Maya Angelou said, people won't remember how you look, but they'll remember how you make them feel. I'm paraphrasing, but if you can get people to feel something and feel that surge of, boy, I feel stressed at work, and this person is helping me talk it through, and we're discussing and comparing notes and bantering, then you're well on your way to a good conversation. Now, next, strategy number 5. Consider what your people, what your listener will already be thinking about. In my last book, named Fascinate, which was all about brands, one of the a gold hallmark of a fascinating brand or a fascinating marketing message was one that tapped into social trends, one that drew upon where the conversation was already going, so that instead of trying to invent it from scratch, the message was simply tapping into something that people were either talking about or thinking about or writing about or buzzing about, tweeting about, or feeling strongly about or debating. So in the same way, before you go into an event, before you go into a discussion, think what's going to be the mindset of the person that you're talking to. What are they pondering about? What are they struggling with? What are they excited about? So let's come back to that example that we were talking about with a business conference. What will people be buzzing about at your next conference? Listen, I go to conferences almost for a living. I was on the road something like 200 days last year. So I know what it's like that you kind of want to, sometimes you just want to parachute in and do your job and leave. And there are a lot of people who go to conferences because it's either a boondoggle vacation or because their boss told them to. But you're not going to get any value out of a conference if you approach it like that, and neither will people around you. Instead, I suggest that you give yourself just a few minutes to think ahead and think, what is it that's happening in the collective conversation? Is there an industry-wide issue that your peers face? Is everybody kind of freaking out about a new trend? Just make a couple of mental notes so that you can be tapping into that collective conversation, and you don't have to do the work of getting from 0 to 60. You can just tap into something that they're already thinking about. So think about what's on everybody's mind. How can you become part of their current mindset? And the goal is to get in sync with them. The goal is for you to get in sync so that you don't have to work so hard, they don't have to work so hard, their brain is engaged with you. Once you spend a moment thinking about this, the next step is, number 6, commit to a strong start. Commit to a strong start. This is one of the biggest mistakes people make when they are trying to make a positive impression. They don't commit to a strong start. So it's kind of like they come in haphazardly, half-heartedly, they kind of say hi, they kind of give a greeting. And so then in a way, it's almost like that's putting the onus on your listener to do the work for you. Remember, we were saying a moment ago, it's better to avoid introducing yourself than to waste their time with a weak introduction. So if you're not going to commit to a strong start, it's possible you should recommit whether you're going to start at all. So when you're introducing yourself, don't wait for the other person to do all the work. Remember, we were saying just a moment ago, those first moments of an interaction are this golden window of opportunity. And if you earn your listener's interest just in those first few seconds by starting with a real question or a real inquiry, using your personality in a positive way, they're far more likely to want to go to the next step and continue to have a real conversation and hopefully grow a real business relationship that doesn't fall prey to the 90% of introductions that fail. So if you're on Twitter and you want to tweet, here's something that you can tweet. When it comes to first impressions, a weak start leads to a poor impression. So those first defining moments of an interaction deserve just a little bit of extra energy. Now, sounds like you guys are still crashing our server. We're working on it right now, but in the meantime, I'm going to give you the revised version of the link. So pay no attention to the link on the screen. And instead, I want you to go to www.anthem.howtofascinate.com. And there at anthem.howtofascinate.com, you'll be able to go straight to the page that'll give you a ton of free resources and also some training options where you'll be able to work with me and with Team Fascinate. So let's move on to number 7. Bring a sense of purpose to the conversation. If you're going to take the time and the energy to engage in the conversation and ask somebody else to give you some of their precious attention span, make sure you're bringing a purpose to it. It doesn't have to be a big purpose. It might just be to entertain, to find out some information, to simply start up a simple discussion that can move you along to understanding if you want to talk a little bit further. But as you stand in line for the registration or you're waiting for the next speaker to begin, you're striking up a conversation, try to come with a real purpose so that the other person knows that you're committed and that you're not doing that half-hearted thing. Make these moments matter. Make the moments matter. It's those in-person interactions especially that really matter, that can not only change your career in terms of the quality of the introduction, the person that you're talking to, but also because when we live a life in which we get input and authentic discussions with other people, we live a more fascinating life. Our brains respond by lighting up in a state of relaxed happiness. Remember, the brain in a state of fascination looks almost like it's meditating. It looks almost like it's in a state of joy. A neuroradiologist referred to it as euphoria. So when you're having a great conversation and you stop thinking about all the hassles of travel, you stop thinking about being nervous, stop thinking about being stressed. Instead, you get in that flow, you get in that zone, you feel relaxed, and your listener feels relaxed, and you are making a brilliant first impression at that point. So here's another tweet, if you want to shout this one out. The purpose of a conversation is not to kill time, but to grow a conversation. Now, over the past couple of days, the past 3 days that we did our Fascinate Certified Advisor training, I had the chance to connect with extraordinary people. Our certified advisors are going to be doing coaching and training. And so I'm going to show you a picture of us. It was just taken this morning, and they just finished their curriculum just a little bit ago. Now, back to connecting with one of my favorite people, Ed, president of Fascinate, and my husband. Ed, can you join us for some more questions?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I love when we get to do Q&A with you guys, because a lot of times you give us the opportunity to describe some concepts that you may not otherwise know, or you are asking us questions that we haven't thought about before, and it provokes new ways of thinking. So bring the questions on.
So this is a fun one, and this fun one comes from Nancy, and she says, "I love the book, yay!"
Yay!
That was it. I just wanted to say. No, not only does she love the book, but she thinks it might be helpful for her daughters.
How old are her daughters?
13 and 15.
Ah.
So she's wondering whether or not she should give the assessment to her daughters, and in what ways would that be helpful to them? What are our recommendations?
Yes, we could tell Nancy how to get the assessment for free for the next. Okay, little secret. Normally the assessment costs $37, but for a very limited amount of time, just in celebration of the launch of the book, we're making it available for free, and you can get that by going to projectfascination.com And when you go to the website, there'll be a video of me describing that we want to spread this message with 100,000 people. And we're so close. We're almost there.
Yeah.
100,000 people in just over the course of the summer.
We did this to celebrate the book launch.
We did this to celebrate the book launch, and it's going to be going away very soon. But if you want to go.
We're still on the bestseller list this week, so.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that.
Yeah.
I think I heard that. So you can sign up at Project Fascination. You get a code, and then you can share that code with up to 100 people, which is $3,700 worth of free assessments. So check it out at projectfascination.com. And to answer your question, Nancy, you were asking about your daughters. First of all, I think it's amazing to be able to find out how somebody else naturally communicates, because it doesn't tell you something that you didn't necessarily know. It just gives you language to be able to communicate and bond with them. So when two people take the assessment who haven't done it together before and they watch each other's videos, there's this recognition, almost like an epiphany that happens, that now I understand that about you. And Ed and I, as you might know, together between the two of us, we have 8 children, and they live by their advantages, and we make jokes about their archetypes. When I was with my daughter in at the Dude Ranch.
And Azalea's 10, by the way.
Azalea's 10.
Right.
Azalea was asking what archetype the various horses were. So, she's trotting along. Said, Mom, what archetype do you think my horse is? It's very spunky. So she thought it was a quick start. We'll see.
We don't recommend that.
Yeah, so we don't have an assessment for pets or horses or farm animals yet, but that could come. But so to answer your question, age 15 is usually about a cutoff. So 15-year-olds can usually do the assessment, and it makes sense. For reading the book, certainly they can read the book, but 13, sometimes the results aren't quite as accurate. So you may find that if a 13-year-old takes the assessment and then retakes it a year later, that the results would be different, because some of the questions are measuring the cues that she's sending out and how other people are most likely to respond to it. And what we found is 13-year-olds don't quite, they can't quite stand outside of themselves yet.
So the cues that 13-year-olds give off can change between 13 and 15.
Right. And I mean, we have 2 13-year-olds. I hope they change.
Okay, so the next question we have is from Nancy Sander, and she is a connoisseur.
Hi, Nancy.
And she has a question sort of about the science behind the test. And her question is, she will get this question. People will ask her how the test, based on how the world sees you, measures how the world sees you when you're the one answering the questions.
Right, I've heard this one before.
Yeah.
So the whole system, the science behind it, is based on the science of branding. And it's based on the fact that an advertising agency already know what kind of result they're going to get from an advertisement when they put a message out. My research began a decade ago with Fascinate. Do we have a copy of Fascinate here? Fascinate was a book that was all about what makes brands fascinating, and it served as the initial research behind this one. Right. So in Fascinate, I did 3 years of research, understanding, based on my experience as a creative director, understanding why do certain brand messages captivate and persuade consumers and other messages don't? Why do certain political speeches persuade and other ones don't? And that's how we developed the system. And the system was not measured on how a brand sees the world. The system is measuring how the world sees the brand based on the messages the brand sends out. So in 2009, we made a big shift, and we created the assessment for people based on the same system. Remember, it's not psychology. It's not measuring how you see the world like a traditional assessment like DISC. This is measuring how other people see you. When you answer the questions, we've already done the algorithm around what kind of cues we know that the responses create, because that was part of the last book's research. So when you're answering the questions, even though they're self-assessed, the questions are designed very carefully calibrated and worded and weighted to be measuring what kind of response you're going to create in your listener based on that input.
Matter of fact, one of our certified advisors today brought up that sometimes in her practice, high-level managers will do 360 tests where they might get 10 different people doing a test, and then they'll give it to the person so that person can see how the world sees them based on 10 tests given to 10 different people. And what she said is she finds that this is a great substitute, economical, smart, one test doing the same thing as a whole 360 battery of tests.
Yeah, and remember, a traditional test is measuring how you are at that moment. It's a snapshot. In other words, it's static of how you see yourself, how you see the world. And this assessment is aspirational. When a brand creates a marketing message, it's about who that brand is at its best. And so in the same way, when you get your assessment, you find out how the world sees you at your best. You know, seriously, I wish that I had put those words. I wish that I put those words on the title. I keep losing it. Okay. Oh gosh, we have one around. Who would ever think? So imagine when you're reading this, how the world sees you at your best. It's how you want to be when you're operating at your peak performance and you're at your most compelling.
So we see it as a tool. The assessment is an aspirational tool that helps you go from not just a status picture, but a static picture, but to a picture of who you are at your best. And you can always move and bring that line out.
Yeah.
Here's another question from Joanne. Should you always strive to be transparent in order to gain an emotional connection, or do you recommend being more guarded concerning first impressions?
Do we know Joanne's archetype?
I don't know Joanne's archetype.
Hey, Elizabeth, can you see if you can find Joanne's archetype? So being authentic is not the same as being transparent. Being authentic means you're being true to yourself. But if you have an archetype, like a veiled strength, it would be uncomfortable for you to come in and start, you know, like the best first impressions are not going to be based on being vulnerable or oversharing or TMI. Instead, the best first impressions are going to be based on being intentional, substantive, to the point. On the other hand, if an innovation personality came in and tried to pretend they were a trust personality, that would be inauthentic and untransparent. But the key here is for you to make sure that you're tapping into qualities that you know that you already have. And you can't know how the world sees you at your best if you haven't taken some time to reflect on how does the world see you, how are you most likely to add value. Remember at the beginning of this conversation, we were talking about how does the two parts of a great first impression. How does the world see you at your best, and how are you most likely to add value? And that's the rigorous research that we've been doing for the last decade with the whole Fascination Advantage system, is being able to measure and create a science out of that so that you don't have to do the guesswork. You don't have to go into a first impression, a first introduction, and have that feeling of awkward insecurity. You know, it's very hard to be compelling and make a connection if you're nervous and distracted and freaking out. But if you can feel calm and it's easy, then you make it easy for your listener to want to engage with you.
So Carol asks, Carol's a saleswoman, and she says, because I have something to sell, I'm worried about being too pushy when asking about problems I can solve. And she says, what can I do about that?
I would love to know our archetype. So if you have a power personality, you might hear that you're too pushy, because power personalities tend to have a strong opinion. They tend to be authorities and leaders, but you shouldn't back that down. The right kind of client, the right kind of customer for you is going to be one that's going to want strong opinions. They're going to want you to have a point of view. And there are going to be certain people that simply aren't going to buy from you. They're not going to be your key customers. The point is not to try to be all things to all people. The point is to try to be exceptional in some specific areas. Clients don't hire you because you're balanced. Clients hire you because you're extraordinary in some way. Let me say that again, Carol. Clients don't hire you because you're balanced. Clients hire you because you're extraordinary in some way. Now, I happen to know that it is almost time to turn into a pumpkin and close out this fireside chat of the webinar. Elizabeth says we have 3 minutes, so we have time for one more question. Pick us a doozy.
Pick us a doozy. Okay. When meeting with someone to try and create an opportunity for an employment or business collaboration, what's the best way to convince them, even if they aren't looking for help necessarily, that you're the person that can add value?
Well, there are two parts of what you were just describing. What's our friend's name?
This is LJ.
LJ, okay. LJ, there are two parts of what you just described. One was, how can I be most likely to convince and get them to want to work with me? And the second part was, even if they don't know. So those are kind of two different situations. In situation A, you're clearly competing against other people, and in situation B, you're competing against inertia. You're trying to get them to take action when they weren't planning on taking action. But in both of those cases, here's an incredibly simple, easy way to make sure that you are adding value from the beginning. Figure out what is the problem for which you are the perfect solution. What is their problem that you can naturally provide, that you can naturally solve. If their problem is that their business is stale and that things have been coasting along and it's getting dusty and then customers aren't engaged on their end, and you have a primary innovation advantage, that is a home run. And suddenly, if you can define that and how you naturally add value, then you're going to be able to be yourself, to be authentic, to make that brilliant first impression. On the other hand, if the problem that they're having is that standards are falling, people aren't motivated, teams are starting to wander off, not really staying committed to results and outcomes, and you have a primary prestige advantage, then you naturally have higher standards. You're really good at being able to show a team, look, we can do better. Maybe you get a little bit competitive. You set up bonus rounds. You can find ways to inspire people by getting them to push for higher standards. So, LJ, again, figure out in what way are you the problem, in what way are you the solution to their problem. So do a little bit of research about their problem, get to know them online and social media, do some research on their company. Before I go into a meeting, I always look up somebody's LinkedIn profile, I read their Twitter feed, I read their website, and I try to get a sense, is there something that they're talking about publicly in social media or privately in the press and the media that is a problem that I could potentially solve. So then when you come in, you can position yourself based on your archetype, based on your anthem.
That's the perfect solution to
and the
that
anthem
problem.
Shows how you are the perfect solution to their problem. I think we asked great questions today, don't you?
Yep.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Hey.
Wonderful.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
We love being able to talk to
Chapter
you. Thanks,
2.
Yeah. No, this is this is part 2.
Part 2.
We love getting your feedback about what you want to hear more of, and I think we may do another fireside chat book club.
I think we should.
You think so?
Think we should.
You'll be there,
Did you say
right?
another book?
And not another book. This last book was 4 years.
Okay.
No, not another book, not right now. But anyway, we can't wait to have you back into our home and send us your questions so we can be responding to them.
Bye.
Bye.